Good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating in the Northwest Heat Accessibility Working Group's webinar. We will be starting in a minute. Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. Thompson is our speaker today with the presentation title, Using Universal Design for Learning and to Promote Student Learning and Engage Learners Where They Are. And Thompson has worked in higher education for the last 19 years in areas of IT, tech support, digital and online learning, database, and system admin, strategic planning, accessibility, instructional design, and as an affiliated faculty. Currently, she is the lead of Universal Design for Active Learning Campus Initiative, chairs the Campus Accessibility Committee, and represents Bothell in the University of Washington IT Accessibility Tri-Campus Task Force, and is a member of the Learning Spaces Design team at the University of Washington, Bothell. And prior to UW, Anna was an instructional design consultant at Boise State University and the director of distance learning at Capster College in Wyoming. So some quick housekeeping before I hand the mic to Anne. We will have the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Please post any questions you may have in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat and discussing your questions during the Q&A. We do provide captioning for today's webinar. It's not embedded in the Zoom. There are links in the chat that will open up in a new browser page for if you would like to look at the caption for the webinar. And today's webinar will be recorded. The recording will be posted on our website, nwheat.org later. And the slides Ann Thompson is going to present is also linked from our website, nwheat.org, if you would like to look at it, like follow along. All right, without further ado, I will be handing the mic to Ann Thompson. Ann, go ahead.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I'm very thankful to be here today and have the opportunity to share a little bit of things I gathered over time, and I hope to also learn from you because I truly believe that learning, it is a collective effort. So we'll get started. As Kun said, and thank you to him and thank you to the call committee for inviting me and making this possible. The link to the slides is provided on this website and is also provided via this bit.ly link on the first slide, bit.ly, bit.ly/NWHEAT-UDL, if you like to also get it from there. Okay, so we'll get started. A lot of this presentation content I initially based on the Universal Design for Learning Theory and Practice book, plus many other books, but this one has been monumental in helping me understand a lot of the basics of Universal Design for Learning. And this book is free to anyone, and anyone could access it from the udltheorypractice.cas.org website, and all it requires is a free account login to access the content online. We have a few learning outcomes, and we hope that by the end, you'll be able to be more familiar and identify universal design principles, be able to describe universal design for learning, and apply the guidelines for UDL into different types of scenarios. So let's start with finding out who's here. Could you please put in the chat, what is the role at your institution or organization? And I'll give you a few seconds to post on the chat. Excellent. So we have librarians, we have faculty, we have directors, instructional designers, wow, disability services staff, that's great, support staff, multimedia, trainers, analysts, more disability service. That is wonderful. That's wonderful. So we have a nice mix of all kinds of different roles in our institutions. And so I hope that this will be helpful to you, this presentation today. Thank you so much for posting. Well, we have a dean too as well. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. All right, so we're gonna start with establishing a baseline, which is one of the principles of UDL, always trying to bring learners to a common ground or common area. So I'll start talking about accessibility with, there are many definitions out there. I like this one because it's simple. In regards to, describing accessibility is used to describe the degree to which a product, device, service, or environment is available to be used by all intended audiences, and in an equitable manner. And this is important because there are many systemic barriers that are in place in all of our different environments today. And what are those? Those can be policies or procedures, practices, the way we do content that can unfairly discriminate certain individuals so they cannot participate fully. And many times, the majority of the time, these are put in place unintentionally. So for example, some barriers that we can probably see every day, using image PDFs or even Office documents without any sort of a structure in them, requiring learners to only demonstrate what they know in one way, using digital media without an alternate format, videos without captions, images without alt text. Also, if we require learners that they move at the same speed as everyone else in their group without any additional support. Or providing information only one way without other options. Also, offering content that has poor contrast. Okay, so thinking about systemic barriers and accessibility, we do have something called accommodations. What are your thoughts on accommodations? If you could please post on the chat for me. Okay, so we have necessary for equitable access. Thank you, Annabelle. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and they place a burden on those who have to ask for them. That is very true. Even though it's an essential thing to offer, right? It should not be an afterthought, correct? Right. Also, we have speaks volumes to students when we anticipate and prepare for common accommodations in advance, absolutely. Accommodations, yes, basically retrofitting after the fact. That's a very good definition. And it could be avoided if universal design is more available. Excellent. One accommodation is not enough to help all. Even though we have accommodations and we'll probably never get rid of it, we'll always have accommodations because we need to accommodate those who need it. We can greatly reduce the need for accommodations and having people ask for it and having accommodations and processes in place that usually accommodate one student for a specific situation. and move beyond that. As someone mentioned, using a universal design, because that can help us create content that is more accessible from the beginning. So less accommodations are needed. Okay. So yeah, somebody said, Cheryl says, when captioning is an essential for participation, but helpful, I don't always feel like I can ask for it. Yeah, it can be cumbersome, sometimes embarrassing to us for extra formats, extra help. Absolutely. So, and that's one of the reasons why many students don't even register in our campuses with the local disability resources office. They might be embarrassed. They might think they can do it on their own and they don't want to deal with it. So it happens quite often. Yes, thank you, Emeka. I hope I said that right. UDL provides accommodations to every student. Partial hearing loss makes captioning helpful, but not to a full disability. From Cheryl, yes, that's absolutely correct. But it's always helpful to have those alternate formats for sure. It always helps. Thank you so much. Yes, and this is another important one from Cindy. It can increase the workload for faculty when we have to write captioning and so forth. Yes, absolutely. And it can lead to burnout. I agree completely. Dr. Sherbrooke Staller from University of Washington Duet Center said that about accommodations, it's a reactive approach to provide access to an individual, while universal design processes are proactive approaches to ensure access for groups of potential participants. So we want to make sure that we are as proactive as possible and not get burned out on it, overwhelmed with it. So there are techniques and strategies that we can use. Thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to refer to some commonly referred to use standards. There are many out there that have to do with accessibility and inclusive teaching, but I'm going to specifically refer to universal design, UD, that was established in the 1970s by Ron Mays, and it had to do at that time specifically with architectural access. So it was physical spaces access. Also, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, that was established in the 80s. And it has been, I'm sorry, it was, I believe it's in the 90s. And then also Universal Design for Learning, UDL, that started in the 80s and under CAST, a group that based those principles on neuroscience, starting from universal design principles. Many of us have probably seen these images about equality and versus equity. The three little boys of different statures standing on the same size of box, right? That is equality. To look over a fence that is quite tall, especially for the little one, to look over a baseball game. But when a box from the tall person is given to the smaller person, it allows the smaller person to see because the taller person didn't need it after all. But let's think about this beyond equality and equity. Let's think about universal design. If universal design was applied from the beginning, we wouldn't have needed the boxes at all. They wouldn't have had to go and say, hey, can I have a box so I can see? They could just gone and be able to see the baseball game on their own. Absolutely, Gloria. Thank you. UDL removes the fence. Yes, definitely. So talking about WCAG, the current version is 2.1, is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They were established by the World Wide Web Consortium as part of their Web Accessibility Initiative. And it has 4 main principles where web content should be perceivable. You should be able to see it and be able to see what it is, right? And access it or hear it, right? It should be operable, easy to navigate. You should be able to understand the content without having to work really, really hard. And also, it should be robust. You should be able to access the content, whether you're using a cell phone or a tablet or a computer, and it should also work with assistive technologies. There's a link to an introduction video that you can access later that talks a little bit, introduces CPACC and some of the meaning behind these principles. Also, in the notes of the slides, I have added additional materials, including a link to the current CPACC 2.1 standard that you can check out. And I'm sharing all of this because it is so important, that things, materials, our content is accessible, but also the way our learners or our intended audience access this content needs to be accessible as well. It's so, so important. And that's why accessibility and UDL work hand in hand to create access and remove barriers for our learners and intended audiences. And we're diverse. I mean, we're human, we're all different. And one thing about universalism for learning is that I mentioned that it was based in neuroscience, and that we're different and we have different brains. We have different needs. We bring our own emotions, our own experiences, our own perceptions to the environments in which we come in. And UDL helps us remove barriers and build persistence and help us so eventually we'll internalize that knowledge. As I mentioned before, it was based on neuroscience, and it is a framework that allows us to improve and optimize teaching and learning for everyone. So we're not going towards designing and addressing the average student, but we're going for a wider breadth of people with different types of abilities and experiences. And part of the neuroscience principles that UDL uses is variability, that it is very dominant in the nervous system, and because no two brains are alike. And knowing and accepting that there's a degree of variability on everyone helps us anticipate those barriers. So we can look at ways how we can remove those barriers. Because learners do not have an isolated learning style, but instead rely on many parts of the brain working together to function within a given context. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Thomas Tobin. He's a UDL leader, and his most recent book, published a couple of years ago, is Teach Anywhere, Learn Everywhere. And he came up and he's shared the idea of +1. And I really like this idea because it's a mental model for prioritizing interactions and helps us think about what is the one place where our learners, where our students have the most trouble, and start there, okay? And add one more way for them to access the content or interact with the content or express their learning. Add one more way. And so always think of those things. Where are those areas in the course where you always get all kinds of questions, or a training or a workshop, right? What are those sticking points? That might be a good place to add one more interaction and one more format and one more way. Okay, so in the chat again, if you could please, could you please share what's one thing that comes to mind that you could do to promote engagement and learning in terms of access or formats or methodologies? Okay, so yeah, formats, yeah, different types of formats, great. Ooh, this is a really good one, Kelly, thank you. Providing notes and slides in advance, definitely, definitely. That gives our learners a chance to look at things ahead of time and prepare. Thank you. Yeah, add video content as well as written content of the same material. That's great. Don't use too much color. I kind of did. But I know it can be confusing if you use too much. The same with too many fonts, right? Or font types. Providing options for assignments for students to choose. That's great. Recordings to revisit. Absolutely. Multiple instruction formats and access points. That's great. So we're having different formats, a lot of video and text, alternate format. That's great. Keep written, clear, and concise. Just-in-time video. That's great. Thank you. And ask at the beginning. Yeah, this is really good. Asking at the beginning how students learn best. What is their preferred mode, right? And I know one instructor on my campus that she meets with her students a couple times during the quarter. And sometimes that doesn't happen, but at least she meets once, one-on-one for a few minutes to ask them, what are their preferences? What are some of the barriers they encounter? How can she help them learn better? And she uses that, and she has been interviewing students and collecting anonymously a lot of the data to look over time and been applying a lot of changes to her teaching, which has definitely improved her teaching and student satisfaction. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. So going back to the UDL framework, so it has 3 basic principles, and it has the area for different parts of the brain that work with different types of the learning process. So the what of learning, the how of learning, the why of learning. And these are connected to the principle of making sure that we provide multiple ways of representation of the information, allow students to express their learning in different ways, and allow them to engage in different ways. So that takes us to the online guidelines that are posted by CAS. The latest version was released in 2018, and you can go to udlguidelines.cas.org to access the guidelines. And they have expanded in this later version, so it goes beyond these and explaining and giving some examples of how can they be applied, and they provided different layers. So the phases or layers, the first one is access. And that first row includes guidelines that suggest ways to increase access. And then this allows, or helps us create better learning goals, to recruit interest, and offering options for perception and physical action. And as you can, so this is basically a table. And as it goes down the different phases, you'll be able to see each one of the phases will have a different area of the guidelines referred to. So if we go to the next layer, the build layer, is the one that suggests ways that develop effort and persistence, language and symbols, expression and communication. These are a lot of the areas that are going to help us help students cement foundation and improve their persistence. So we have students that continue and persist throughout the quarter or the semester or that period of time for that class. And then they return. They're able to find a satisfaction and return the next quarter or the next year and continue. So on the next layer of the UDL guidelines is internalize. This is the part that is akin to, I don't know if you're familiar with other areas that the best, it doesn't come to mind right now, but the one way you can tell someone has learned is by seeing changes in themselves and also seeing how they can teach others. So that internalization process is paramount in the learning process. And this part suggests ways that how we can empower our learners, allow them to make decisions and make choices that help them progress as a learner, and allow them to try different ways to self-regulate, do time management, get organized, find ways to comprehend and make decisions that affect their learning. And I'm looking back on the chat. So Margaret shared that as at the beginning of class, how students learn best. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a great thing to ask to establish that foundation and that baseline to help to be able to start helping students and making things so they're accessible to everyone. Okay, so the bottom part of the guidelines is the goals. Oh, thank you, Ray. Because I'm presented, I had a brain cloud happening here. Say nicely. Yes, I was thinking the level of Bloom's taxonomy, and as you move through the levels when they start to apply, and then the part of Bloom's taxonomy that wasn't completely finished, that Bloom didn't get to finish, the part where a learner internalizes that effective aspect of learning. That's very important. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So in the UDL organizer, what our goals are when we apply the principles of UDL is that our learners will become purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed. We want to develop expert learners. And so if we have our eyes on that and work the different things along the way, we certainly can do it. Okay, so we've done a lot of theory and background information. Let's go into some examples, some practical examples and some strategies. So this is an example of a barrier. Let's say a student is entering a lesson, a student or any type of learner entering a lesson, unit, or course. And as we know, not everyone is in the same place when they begin. When they start a course or begin some sort of training, right? What are the different ways that we can help that learner? So I have a comment in the chat. Oh, thank you, Ray. Yes, absolutely. I appreciate it. Okay, so some of the checkpoints that we have in UDL principles to help our students activate or supply background knowledge. What are some ways to do that? How can we link to where they are, to what they already know? Maybe connecting from things from a prior course, some background information. Sometimes we feel that our learners come underprepared. So how about offering some resources for them to get up to par that they can take on their own and they can access on their own? Yes, starting with what they know. Absolutely, absolutely. That establishes that great baseline for everyone. And then from there to the unknown. Also, other things, optimize individual choice and autonomy. How can we do that? How can we give them choices in the environment? So Radka says, assessment survey that helps identify what they know and they need to learn. That is a great way. That is a great way. Starting with like a pre-knowledge survey, that's a good way to establish a baseline. And provide assignments that can be started at various levels. Absolutely, thank you. Those are great ideas. Another thing, another checkpoint that can apply to this barrier, vary demands and resources to optimize challenge, right? And that goes right along with Alice's comment. Thank you. All right, so here's some other ideas. Use the script hyperlinking to connect to curated resources. There are a lot of great resources out there, but you are always open to create your own, right? Or if you have some resources that come with publisher material, with OER materials, and those are great because they're low cost or many times free for our students. You can also emphasize important parts, important messages in the content, like with text boxes or using color sparingly, as long as color is not being used as the only means to share information, but to bring emphasis to things, right, to important information. As an example of an activity, You could have an activity, have students create or learners create a glossary list of key terms that they all need to learn. And this, I have an example on this slide of a list that you can do, a glossary list that you can do on Canvas, on a Canvas page. And that's what it looks like. And the code, let me go back here. The code looks like this. And it is a hidden slide right now, but it is part of the slides that I'm sharing with you if you're interested. And I thought that was a really good tidbit that I've used before to create a nice looking glossary of terms. But there's a feature in Canvas where you can allow students to edit a Canvas page that you have created, use a sort of a wiki. And I always get positive reviews from those when students co-create content together. Excellent. Okay, so some more examples. You can create video. We are in the time of video during this pandemic. Video can be very, very powerful to share ideas, to demonstrate, and at the same time, making sure that there's at least some transcript or captions that can assist to connect learners with that knowledge, especially if there's a lot of technical information. Also, linking to baseline tutorials for students that need them, which mentioned previously. Scaffolding, that is a great technique to help students move through different layers, different steps, building up to something bigger, to something more complex. So it helps them create and work on their organization skills. And then again, what was already shared in the chat, have low-risk formative assessments. And this can be, like we're talking about the pre-knowledge surveys, but also can be very low-risk assessments throughout to enforce learning, to help students be more familiar with their learning, and only worth a few points, and to prepare them for the bigger things. That gives them choices in assessment. I have a lot more examples in this Google document. I'm going to show right now. Make sure I zoom in a little bit. And here's some other examples of barriers, the checkpoint, and some suggested solutions. So maybe, especially right now with, most of our students are fully online, even with synchronous sessions of courses, but they still have to pace themselves more, and they have to control and have a lot better time management skills so they can get their work done. So this checkpoints that refer to that, the checkpoints are underneath each one of those areas in UDL. Facilitate personal coping skills and strategies, and support planning and strategy development. So some ideas, different areas where you can provide emphasis in the content, some stop and think content to allow them to reflect or help them reflect before moving forward. Providing checklists. I don't know what I would do without checklists. I use them all the time, even though they keep on growing, but I use them, and they really, really help me trying to not only keep track of the things I need to do, but also get that little bit of satisfaction when I check something off. Things like provide models, scaffolds, and feedback. Models are a really good way to illustrate what something should look like. A lot of students that I've talked to, sometimes they say, hey, we need more examples. We need more, not necessarily a template, but examples of what the big project can be to get ideas flying and sparking ideas. The same, when I'm doing a workshop and training our faculty or training staff, provide some examples to show how certain things work. And then also using real life situations. that demonstrate coping skills, but also allows us to connect. It's a good tool to connect prior knowledge with real, and also connect content with real events that we can relate to more easily. So here are a few more examples. Making explicit links, alternate text when in terms of multimedia. Maybe learners and instructors struggle with meaningful collaboration online. And this is something really big right now. So use, and the part of UDL that applies to this is use multiple tools for construction and composition is one of the things that connects in here. And so here's the idea of using Canvas pages as wikis for brainstorming, group meeting support to make collations of links. Let me ask real quick on the chat, what are the LMSs that our attendees are using in their organizations or institutions? If you could share in the chat. So we have Moodle, Canvas, okay. Blackboard, oh, Sakai and Canvas, okay. Okay. It looks like it's predominantly Canvas, but there's some other ones in there. That's great. Great, thank you. And Moodle. I use Moodle in two of my past institutions. And I haven't been able to keep up with it, but I know that there was the ability to add a wiki to a Moodle back then. I'm not sure if that option is available. I would imagine it is. Oh, there's one, D2L, Brightspace. Excellent, excellent. Does Moodle have that option still to create wikis and set it up as an activity for students? If you could put that in the chat, please. Yes, it has a wiki. Okay, great, great, thank you. I was hoping it still had that. In Canvas, the example I showed earlier, the Canvas pages can work, are basically HTML pages and can work as wikis as well. And I'm not sure, how about Blackboard users and D2L users? Do you have a similar option in your LMS or Sakai? Blackboard has the option. Great, thank you. Yes, but not the best. Okay. For Sakai and Blackboard. Okay. Thank you. Yes. So we have some options, right? And then there's always the option to turn to some external tools. One example that I've used before is using a Google Doc for students to collaborate. And as a matter of fact, we've offered on our campus a course called Teaching Online 101 for our faculty. And in that, one of the first activities we had was an annotating syllabus activity for our faculty that were participating in the course, and in which we had the syllabus content in a Google Doc, and we made the commenting option available so they could commenting about making suggestions and about asking for clarification of unclear areas of the syllabus. Oh, thank you for sharing the bit.ly link. I appreciate it, Kun. Excellent. So there's some more resources on this Google Doc. A link to the book again, UDL guidelines, and as well as an UDL guidelines worksheet. Let me show you what that looks like. This is something that you can fill in with different ideas and reuse, and to get to start throwing ideas out there and start putting out more lesson plans on what you can do. Here's a couple sample tools, and of course this is not an exhaustive list, but I made these in just Google Docs, and they're really easy to make. A step organizer, and in Google Docs with an image that you can edit in the drawing tool. So these are basically text boxes that you can edit. Okay, and I also made a text version of that using headings. So you can play with it, and just I was showing you some possibilities, right? Especially if you want to create more than one format for those. And you can apply the organizers for organizing time, organizing tasks, organizing for projects, for assignment, to help students with the scaffolding. So they can be used in many different ways, those organizers. For planning, I have an example of an UDL lesson planner, another Google Doc. And this can be edited. You can use it as however you like. I just added a few things. And I based it on one that I saw in a UDL tutorial that was in lynda.com. So it's based after that. And I thought, hey, that's pretty good. And so it goes through, creating a lesson plan in general, your content, your learning objectives, what are some of the essential questions, what kind of assessments you're going to have, what are some of the key concepts, what are some of the, some of the support materials that you're going to have to support the content and reinforce the content. And each section has UDL strategies lists, some ideas, things that you can use for different parts, connecting background knowledge and the description and some ideas of UDL strategies to make the connections. Then for processes, for UDL strategies for processes that you can use. In this case, think aloud, reflection. You can have visual processes. You can have auditory processes, kinesthetic processes. As we know, the more senses that are involved in learning, the more lasting and more deep the learning becomes. So this supports all of these. So these are just some ideas that you can use. And another resource I wanted to share with you, if you wanted to learn more about accessibility and creating accessible content, this is a course I put together, and it's based on content that was shared previously through the state technical and community colleges in the state of Washington. And then I customized it for University of Washington. And it's the Accessibility 101 course. It's public access. It's in the free Canvas website, and any of you should be able to access it. And if it asks you for a login, just create, and you don't have a free instructor account, just create an account and you'll be able to access it as well. I have it as a public course. Thank you, Gloria. The Google Doc template. Okay. So, so all of the links are contained. This is the More Barriers and Strategies example. And this is within the slides. If I go to the previous slide, this Google document connects to other areas and other Google Docs. So it's on the slides in there. And thank you so much. This is what I what I had to share, and we'll leave. If we can go on to questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions. And please, you're welcome to reach out to me at thomana@uw.edu. I'm also on Twitter at @techana with one N. And I have a little blog, Access Design blog, that I need to write more on, but you're welcome to contact me with questions even beyond this webinar.
All right, thank you, Anne. And now we will be doing the Q&A. If you have any questions you want to ask, please post them in the chat. And also, while you were thinking about questions you may be asking Anne, and just we will be posting the recordings as well as all the slides of this webinar at nwheat.org. It may take a couple hours to process the video, We'll be trying to post it at latest tomorrow. We will also be sending out a survey questions for the webinar. And so if you could answer some brief questions on what you think about the webinar and what kind of topic you want to hear in the going forward in the future, let us know.
Well, if I can, let's see. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the comments in there. Was any part of the presentation not clear, or did I go over too fast? I was trying to link as many things as possible so you can also access on your own. But you're welcome to also, if you want to give some feedback. Oh, thank you, Ray. I appreciate it. One thing about UDL is interesting because we hear, oh, it's all about multiple ways of representation, expression, and engagement. And we hear a lot about that, but we don't hear beyond that. And it is, I love to see examples and use examples how we can not only apply it in our teaching, but also in training, but also in our own work. How can we apply, for the content I create that goes to the web? So it uses UDL principles. So it's more usable by everyone.
Hey, I got one question sending to me. Is what are some strategies for working with faculties to help them get started and see success on the UDL?
Great, that's a great question. Thank you. So going back to one of the slides I mentioned, the +1 approach, I find that very, very useful because it can be overwhelming. Faculty have a lot of requirements, a lot of things that they have to address, plus caring for their students and teaching their students. And so thinking of, one more thing sometimes can be overwhelming. But thinking about the +1 approach and thinking about those areas in which students have the most problems, the most questions, the most issues, start there. Offer one more format, one more type of interaction. It doesn't have to be the same. It could be, represented differently. It could be something interactive, right? For example, it could be Mathematica has a lot of demonstrations are interactive, and that could be used to demonstrate. Make sure that you do have, text explanations in your content for people who cannot access the visual interactions. But thinking just one thing, what is the one thing that you can add right now? One thing that you can change. How about your syllabus? Is your syllabus accessible and usable? Is it clear? Maybe that's the +1 to start with. So this process of creating accessible materials and using UDL and many, many other great pedagogies to make our teaching better and more effective and better for our students, it's all iterative. It doesn't have to be done all right now. So thinking about baby steps, what's one thing that we can do, start working on today? The next thing that I edit, the next thing that I update, and the next thing one thing that I can add to help my students, my learners. Does that help answer a question?
I think our second question is very similar with the first one. Like, so it's talking about UDL is a broad concept. Like, can we break it down to smaller units and according to the principle of UDL? Like, so it's asking about like baby steps of all different components of UDL that I can do one by one.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So certainly going back to the +1 approach, and then also thinking, okay, maybe I have a couple of videos that could use captioning. Do I have a transcript when I created those videos? Because the transcript could be made available, and that making that available right away can can support the video, for example, and I'm trying to address the video question as well without being too overwhelming. Using automated tools as a foundation. So for example, and I keep referring to Canvas because that's what the current LMS that I work with. So if you upload a video directly to Canvas or create a video in Canvas, there's usually there's a way to add captions. However, if you use something like Panopto, it has the option to add automatic captions. Zoom recordings have that option as long as it's turned on your account. And if it's a pro account, of course, to create automatic captions. If you don't have those options available, you can either use or an existing Google account or create a Google account and use YouTube, upload your video there and have the automatic transcription, create that foundation. So you have captions to begin with, and all you have to do is some quick edits to make it more accurate. And those are some of the strategies that I've used and I've recommended to faculty. So I started there, having a foundation to make it a lot easier to work. And then even though video is very powerful, it could be very overwhelming to caption a 2-hour video or 1 hour, lecture video, right? If you want to offer mini lectures of videos and keep them to like 10 minutes, that is more manageable to separate them. And it also supports the principle of chunking information. So students can watch something and then you can provide activities that reinforce that learning for that little piece.
I think we'll also have so the second question, I think you already addressed about the faculty, the caption of the videos for faculties. Another comment in the chat, I think it's more of a comment on the checkpoint level of UDL principle, fairly concrete specific strategies to use. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So if you go into the UDL itself, all of the guidelines, and go and delve into it, each one of those points separates us out, and you can use, maybe have a training or adopt one of those practices and start there. One that seems more like a low-hanging fruit for you.
All right, do we have any more questions? And also, Maria, maybe you can post the link to the survey for the, we have a survey for the webinar if you would like to give us some feedbacks. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat.
One more resource that is linked in the slides, and I forgot to mention, is this UDL progression rubric. This is something that can be used to help evaluate the application of UDL principles. And it goes through providing the options for recruiting interest, persistence, etc. And it goes through each one of the guidelines. Engagement, goes through the different sections, representation, and then expression is the last part. And in all of them, it works as a rubric, providing help and information on emerging proficient and progressing towards expert practice of UDL. So if you start with the emerging side from this rubric, that can also be helpful as evaluating how you're doing or where to start. Oh, so the rubric, I was asking where I found the rubric. So the rubric is from the UDL website, from castpublishing.org, is linked from their website.
All right.
So if you want, let me see, I probably copy. Let me put the link directly so you have it on the chat to that rubric. There we go.
Oh, there's one more question.
Okay. So yeah, you're welcome, Alice. Are there specific strategies beyond heading structure and alt text for students who have assistive technology? Yes, yes. Other strategies that to use is, let's see, make sure that you're using the built-in lists instead of creating fake lists to provide additional structure to the content. Other things to use is keep tables for organizing content and data only, not to make content look pretty. For users of assistive technology, tables require an additional degree of know-how and to navigate them fully, navigate them well. So if you don't need a table, don't use a table. I have had many instructors who they decided on their own that they even no longer wanted to use a table for their course schedule. They did it as a list with using headings and lists, either bulleted or ordered lists with numbers or letters. And they hear from their students that they really like it. Some other ones who did use tables, just make sure you make them accessible. That make sure that the headers are marked if you need to use them. And the course that I share, the Accessibility 101, you can peruse through the content. It has specific content for Office documents, for Canvas content, which applies for HTML, and some basic principles of accessibility that you can apply, but also well-organized information. Things about course navigation is very, very important in courses. Eliminating items in the course menu that are not needed, that removes a barrier that can be caused by having too many overwhelming things that are not necessary and having to figure out what they are. These are just some suggestions. And ask your learners, ask your students. They are the best ones to tell you what can help. Ooh, how about the use of icons? Okay. They have an icon. Canvas and Kai have an icon tool set with built-in alt text. This can be used to recognize and search keywords to search a page. Absolutely, absolutely. If you use icons, make sure that you have alt text, or that the ones that are built in, they do have alt text so they can be searchable by assistive technologies. That's really good, because the thing is, we need to design for the majority of our learners, not just for our learners who are using assistive technologies, right? We need to try to design more widely. And many of the population, of human population, we identify ourselves with being visual learners. So keep your courses colorful and beautiful and engaging visually as well. You can have that and have it be accessible and have it be effective.
All right, it's almost at the top of the hours. And thank you, Ann Thompson, for bring us a wonderful presentation today. And we will be please check our website, nwheat.org. We will be posting the recordings and all the slides and documents there soon. And check our websites. We will be doing one webinar every quarter. So check back. We will have new webinars showing up there soon. Thank you, everybody, for participating in today's webinar, and have a good noon time.